Welcome back to the deep dive. We're jumping right back into the Texas Revolution, and things are really heating up.
That's right. The Texian force is this sort of army of the people. They've got some real momentum going.
Yeah, if you've been following along, you know they had that symbolic win at Gonzales, keeping the cannon.
And then, boom, they moved fast and took the supply depot at Goliad. Big moves early on.
So that brings us to October 1835. They're feeling confident, but now they're heading towards the main event, right? San Antonio de Bexar.
Exactly. And Bexar is where General Cos, the Mexican commander, has set up shop. He arrived with very specific orders from Mexico City, crushed this rebellion.
And part of that was arresting key Texan leaders, the patriots as they saw themselves. He wanted them chastised.
Yes, the language was strong. Arrest and chastisement, so the political stakes. Extremely high. Cos needed to make an example.
Okay, so the Texians have this psychological edge from the early wins, but now they run smack into the reality of Bexar.
Right. They arrive outside the biggest town in the region, and it's not just a town. It's got the main Mexican garrison, fortified positions, and of course the place we now know as the Alamo.
Which was already a significant structure then, a real stronghold for Cos.
Absolutely. This is where the whole nature of the conflict shifts. We go from these quick, almost guerrilla-style skirmishes.
Morale boosters?
Exactly, morale boosters, to the long, hard grind of a proper military siege. These volunteers show up, fired up, ready to fight.
But they're looking at professional soldiers behind thick stone walls.
It's a completely different kind of war. And frankly, this volunteer army, structurally, logistically, they just weren't built for a long siege. Not yet, anyway.
Okay, let's dig into that. The mission is clear. Take Bexar. But first, they need to even figure out how to stay outside Bexar effectively.
Right. And this brings us to the key figures for today's story. Leading an advanced group, James Jim Bowie.
The legend, the knife fighter, the frontiersman.
That one. And alongside him, James W. Fannin. A bit younger, had some formal military training, maybe a bit more by the book, sometimes seen as more cautious.
That's an interesting pairing, the improvising frontiersman and the more structured officer type.
It really is, and understanding that dynamic is, I think, pretty important here. Because what happens next, this Battle of Concepción, it wasn't some grand planned assault.
No. What was it then?
Our sources frame it as something much more mundane, almost routine. It starts as a simple scouting mission.
Just looking for a place to camp?
Basically, yeah.
Huh.
Find a better spot for the main army to settle in for the siege. A necessary chore. But it escalates dramatically.
Into a fight for survival.
Completely. Against, like you said, 4-to-1 odds, it becomes this desperate accidental battle.
And this accident becomes a major turning point.
Hugely important. This unexpected victory at Concepción does more than just win a fight. It becomes this massive psychological boost. It proves, maybe for the first time conclusively, that these Texian volunteers could stand up to professional Mexican troops.
And not just stand up to them, but actually beat them decisively.
Exactly. Beat them badly, even when outnumbered.
Yeah.
It's the moment, you could argue, where they start to truly believe in their own tactical abilities, not just their enthusiasm.
So it cemented their fighting capacity, but maybe also hinted at a bit of overconfidence later.
That's a really good point. It definitely proved their capabilities with their rifles and terrain, but yeah, that success might have bred a dangerous level of confidence down the line. It's a pivotal moment.
Okay, let's paint the picture then. Early days of the siege of Bexar, Stephen F. Austin is in command. He'd just gotten back from that long trip to Mexico, kind of thrown into this military leadership role he didn't really seek out.
Right. Austin was fundamentally a diplomat, a colonizer, an administrator, not a general. And he finds himself leading this army of the people.
So besides the high morale from Gonzales and Goliad, what was the actual condition of this army?
Well, the spirit was definitely high, no question. Volunteers had poured in from settlements like Mina, San Felipe, down to the Brazos. They were motivated, but Austin immediately ran into huge problems. Command problems, supply problems. It comes down to that word. Volunteer. He was leading volunteers, not professional soldiers.
And that distinction makes all the difference in a siege situation.
Absolutely. Think about what General Cos had inside Bexar. Standardized weapons, reliable powder and shot, probably some kind of medical support, engineers maybe, and, critically, discipline. Soldiers who stay put and follow orders.
Austin had none of that.
Pretty much none. His men often brought their own guns, usually their hunting rifles. Supplies were catch as catch can, relying on wagons coming over long, sometimes dangerous routes from the settlements.
And volunteers might just decide to go home if things got boring or tough.
That was always a risk. Commitment could be fluid. It wasn't a standing army with enlistment terms. It sounds inspiring, an army of the people. But for the guy in charge trying to coordinate a siege.
A logistical nightmare.
Exactly. A complete nightmare. And this lack of preparedness showed up immediately outside Bexar.
How so? What was the first big problem?
Their campsite? The initial spot they picked just wasn't good. Sources say it was too exposed.
Vulnerable to attack from Coase's troops.
Yeah, vulnerable to quick raids, what they called sallies, coming out from the fortifications, harassing attacks. And maybe even more importantly, it made their supply lines shaky.
If the wagons couldn't get through safely.
The army melt away. Simple as that. Austin knew they needed a better position. Something closer to the city to tighten the noose, but also more defensible, more protected, where they could actually receive supplies reliably.
Makes sense. So this need for a better campsite leads directly to the scouting mission.
Precisely. That's the context. Austin gives the order to Jim Bowie and James Fannin.
The two leaders we mentioned.
Right. Take a group of men, head down the San Antonio River, and find a suitable spot.
How many men went with them?
The sources generally agree on about 90 men. A pretty substantial detachment.
And who were these men? Just average volunteers?
It was a mix, but significantly, this group included a very motivated, recently arrived unit called the New Orleans Grays.
Ah, the Grays. They weren't Texans originally, were they? Volunteers from the States.
Exactly. They represent that crucial element of outside support flowing into Texas. These guys traveled a long way.
What drove them? Idealism, adventure, land?
Probably a mix of all three, Definitely some genuine belief in the Republican cause against what they saw as Santa Anna's centralist tyranny. But yeah, the promise of land grants for service was also a powerful motivator for many.
And they were more organized, maybe had uniforms?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
They tended to be more cohesive, more disciplined than some of the local militia groups. Putting them with Bowie and Fannin meant this scouting party had some real backbone, some of the most committed fighters Austin had.
Okay, so 90 men, including the Grays, led by Bowie and Fannin. The objective: simple reconnaissance. Find a good campsite.
That was the order. Find a spot with good cover, near water, closer to Bexar, where the main army could move, set up properly, secure supplies, and really begin the siege in earnest.
But Bowie and Fannin seem to have pushed on a bit further, maybe faster than Austin anticipated. They didn't just scout and report back.
No, they didn't. They moved downriver, maybe about 2 miles below the main part of San Antonio, and then they made a key decision.
Which was?
To head for the grounds of the old, abandoned mission Conception.
Ah, the mission itself. Stone walls, right. That sounds like a good spot.
It offered potential, absolutely. Substantial walls, inherently more defensible than camping in an open field. So they decided to make camp there for the night. This is October 27th. They set up near a distinctive bend in the river, a sort of horseshoe shape.
Thinking they'd found the perfect location. Secure, defensible.
They must have thought so. They likely believed they were still operating under the general protection of the main Texian force nearby, that the Mexican army wouldn't risk coming out that far in strength.
A fatal assumption, it turns out.
A critical miscalculation, because their movements hadn't gone unnoticed. Whether it was local loyalists or Mexican patrols, somebody saw them.
And reported back to General Cose.
Straight back to Cose's headquarters in Bexar. And Cose, or perhaps his field commander Ugartechea, saw an opportunity.
A chance to hit this isolated group.
A golden opportunity. 90 men, including those motivated New Orleans Grays, separated from the main army. Cose saw a chance to land a swift, devastating blow. Wipe out this detachment, crush Texian morale, maybe even break the siege before it really got going.
Wow. So as Bowie and Fannin's men are settling down for the night, feeling pretty secure,
Cose is already dispatching a large force under the cover of darkness to surround them and attack at dawn.
the stakes just skyrocketed, losing Bowie, Fannin, and those 90 men, especially the Grays.
It could have been catastrophic for the revolution right then and there. If that detachment was destroyed, the morale of the whole army of the people, already shaky with supply issues, might have just evaporated. Cose had a real chance here to seize the momentum back decisively.
Okay, the scene is set for disaster. 90 Texians camped, feeling safe, while nearly 400 Mexican soldiers are silently closing in. Let's talk about the morning itself, October 28, 1835. The environment played a role, didn't it?
It really did. Nature stepped in a big way. Early that morning, the San Antonio River Valley got socked in with a really heavy, thick fog.
Common for that area that time of year.
Apparently so, yeah. A dense, low-lying river fog, and it just blanketed everything, cloaked the mission Conception, hid the Texian camp from any distance.
So initially, the fog might have seemed like cover for the Texians.
You might think that, but it actually worked perfectly for the attackers. It masked their final approach, it muffled sound, hid their movements, it allowed the Mexican force to get right on top of the Texian position before being detected.
Killing the suspense. Who was leading the Mexican force?
Colonel Domingo de Ugartechea was the commander on the scene. He had roughly 400 troops with him, professional infantry, cavalry units, and importantly, artillery cannons.
And they used the fog to just completely surround the camp.
Systematically. They moved quietly, deploying in a wide semicircle around that horseshoe bend in the river where the Texians were camped. They formed up their battle lines in the open field just above the riverbank, while the Texians were still largely unaware.
So when did the Texians realize what was happening, that moment of dawning horror?
It seems to have been just after dawn broke, maybe around 6:30 or 7 a.m. The fog started to lift, just a little, patches clearing. And the Texian sentries, the lookouts posted just outside the main camp.
They saw them.
They saw them, or perhaps heard the movements becoming clearer. They suddenly realized the camp perimeter was being sealed off, that Mexican soldiers were already in position, forming lines. The trap had been sprung.
The shock must have been immense. One minute you're waking up, maybe getting a fire going the next.
The next, you realize you're looking at nearly 4 times your number of professional soldiers, armed with muskets and cannons, arrayed for battle just yards away.
90 men, mostly volunteers, some maybe still half asleep, versus 400 regulars.
It's an absolutely terrifying scenario. Ugartechea's men were trained, disciplined, likely expecting a quick, brutal fight ending in annihilation for the Texians. That horseshoe bend, which seemed like a good defensive spot the night before, suddenly it felt like a cage.
Trapped against the river.
Exactly. This immediately put Bowie and Fannin in an impossible position. A true crisis moment.
What were the options? Try to run for it.
A desperate retreat seemed suicidal. They'd be cut down in the open by the Mexican cavalry. There was nowhere really to run to quickly.
So make a stand. But how? They were caught completely unprepared.
Right. Making a stand seemed equally hopeless given the numbers and the artillery. They had moments, maybe minutes, to decide. Their lives, and arguably the immediate future of the Texian cause, depended entirely on what they did next.
They needed a miracle or some kind of tactical genius.
They needed someone to see an advantage where none seemed to exist. And the sources suggest that while Fannin might have been considering options, it was Jim Bowie, drawing on that deep well of frontier experience, who saw the potential in the ground beneath their feet.
He looked at the terrain differently.
Instantly. He recognized that fighting Ugartechea's force conventionally, creating volleys in the open, was a death sentence. They'd be overwhelmed in minutes. His focus shifted immediately to, how can we use this specific piece of ground to survive?
Okay, this is the heart of it. Bowie's response. You called it a riverbank fortress strategy. He didn't build anything, right? He used what was there. Describe that terrain again.
Right. No time to build fortifications. He had to use the natural features. The key was the riverbank itself at that horseshoe bend. Accounts describe it as being quite steep, maybe 10, even 15 feet high in places, almost like a natural trench wall.
A sharp drop-off from the field where the Mexican troops were forming.
Exactly. And crucially, that steep bank leading down to the river was covered in thick vegetation, trees, bushes, dense undergrowth.
So what was Bowie's order?
Get down. He ordered the 90 men immediately down off the upper level, positioning them right along the base of that steep riverbank, using both the vertical drop and the thick brush for cover and concealment.
Ah, so they weren't fighting on the bank, but below the lip of the bank.
Precisely. They effectively disappeared from the direct line of sight of the Mexican soldiers standing in the field above them.
That immediately changes everything, doesn't it? It negates the Mexican numbers and firepower advantage.
Fundamentally, it created this bizarre, lopsided tactical situation. You have the Mexican infantry formed up in traditional lines on the flat ground above the riverbank.
Following their European-style training.
Right. And they start firing volleys down towards the riverbank where they think the Texians are, or where they last saw them.
But because the Texians are hunkered down low against that steep bank.
Most of the shots go right over their heads. The angle is wrong. The musket balls whistle harmlessly past, maybe hitting the trees behind them or splashing into the river.
Incredible. So the standard tactic of massed volley fire was rendered almost completely ineffective just by positioning.
Largely, yes. Now, let's contrast the weapons and how they were used. This is critical to understanding Concepción.
Okay, the Mexican side first. What were they using?
Standard infantry weapon of the time was the smoothbore musket, probably the British Brown Bess or a similar model widely used by armies then.
Smoothbore meaning not accurate.
Not accurate at all beyond, say, 50 to maybe 100 yards, tops. The ball didn't spin, so it tumbled unpredictably. These muskets were designed for mass fire at relatively close range, frighten the enemy with noise, smoke, and a wall of lead, hoping enough hits find a mark in a large formation.
So they're firing large volumes of inaccurate shots at an enemy they can barely even see.
Pretty much. Now, flip to the Texians. They're down behind cover, protected. And what are they carrying?
They're hunting rifles, long rifles.
Exactly. Kentucky rifles, Pennsylvania rifles, whatever they brought from home. These are rifled barrels. The grooves inside spun the bullet.
Making them much more accurate.
Vastly more accurate and over much longer distances. A skilled shooter with a long rifle could reliably hit a man-sized target at 200 yards, maybe even further.
So the Texians had precision instruments.
Precision instruments, and they used them precisely. They weren't just blazing away. They were concealed. They could take their time, pick their targets.
And their targets were?
Uniformed Mexican soldiers standing in neat lines in the open field above them. Easy targets.
Oh, wow.
Sources say the Texians were making every shot count, taking careful aim. Some accounts even mention loading buck and ball, a rifle ball, plus some smaller buckshot to maximize the effect of each shot, since reloading these rifles was slower than muskets.
So you've got one side, the larger force, relying on inaccurate volume fire against ghosts, and the other side, the smaller force, invisible, protected, delivering aimed, deadly shots with superior weapons.
It's a complete tactical mismatch, purely because of terrain and weaponry. The Mexican Army's standard tactics became their biggest weakness here.
Did they try to charge, get down to the riverbank?
They did. Several attempts were made to charge the Texian position. But think about it, as soon as soldiers stepped forward into the open to charge down that bank, or even just to get a better shot,
they became prime targets for those rifles.
Instantly, especially officers leading the charge. They were picked off with devastating efficiency. The charges faltered before they could even get close.
What about the cannons? Couldn't the artillery blast them out of there?
That was the other major factor. The Mexican forces did bring up at least one cannon, but again, the terrain worked against them.
How so?
To hit the Texians down low against the riverbank, they had to depress the cannon barrel, significantly aim it downwards at a steep angle. This was apparently difficult to do effectively with the field carriages they had.
So the cannon shots were also going too high?
It seems many were, firing over the heads of the Texians, just like the musket balls. The cannon made a lot of noise, kicked up dirt, probably terrifying, but it wasn't inflicting the kind of damage needed to dislodge Bowie's men. The brush and trees likely helped diffuse any shrapnel, too.
It's amazing how Bowie just instantly saw how to neutralize their biggest threats. There's mention that the few Texians who were hit might have been hit by shots from the far side of the Mexican line.
Yeah, some accounts suggest that, which really underscores how well protected they were from the main frontal assault. Shots fired from one wing of the Mexican line might have traveled across the horseshoe bend and hit someone on the opposite side.
Did the cavalry try anything? Try to flank them?
They attempted maneuvers, yes, but the thick woods and the steep banks made a coordinated cavalry charge down into that riverside position very difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah.
And again, exposed horses and riders.
More targets for the riflemen.
Exactly. They focused on high-value targets, officers, artillery crews, cavalrymen.
So despite the terrifying start and the overwhelming numbers, the actual fight didn't last long.
No, it was surprisingly short and incredibly intense. Probably lasted somewhere between 30 minutes to maybe 45 minutes in total, from the first real volleys to the Mexican retreat.
What caused the retreat? The losses?
The heavy, accurate, and seemingly unstoppable losses, especially among officers trying to lead attacks, combined with the complete inability to effectively hit back at the hidden Texians, discipline just crumbled under that kind of pressure.
They couldn't see who was shooting them, and they couldn't stop their own men from falling.
It became untenable. Morale collapsed. The professional soldiers, trained for open field battles, were totally disoriented by this frontier-style fighting.
So the retreat wasn't orderly?
Not at all. Sources describe it as a rout. Colonel Ugartex's forces basically broke ranks and fell back in confusion towards the safety of San Antonio.
And they left something important behind.
Yes. In their haste, they abandoned their cannon on the battlefield. That captured cannon became a huge symbol, a piece of professional artillery taken by volunteer riflemen. It was a tangible sign of the victory, and a deep humiliation for Kos's army. #conclusion.
The aftermath of Conception is just stunning when you look at the numbers. A short, maybe 30-minute fight that started as an ambush against the Texians. What was the final butcher's bill?
It's why it's often called the miracle at Concepción. The numbers are incredibly lopsided. Sources vary slightly, as they often do, but they consistently show the Mexican army suffered significant casualties. We're talking somewhere in the range of 60 to perhaps 76 killed and wounded.
60 to 76 casualties on the Mexican side. And for the Texians. The 90 men who were trapped.
Almost unbelievable. The consensus is only one Texian was killed in the fighting. One man killed. Richard Andrews is named in the accounts. A handful of others might have sustained minor wounds, but essentially they suffered almost no losses.
One killed versus potentially over 70 on the other side when outnumbered 4-1.
Exactly. It transforms Concepción from just a successful defense into, well, a tactical masterpiece. It was undeniable proof that the Texian approach, leveraging terrain, emphasizing marksmanship with superior rifles, could utterly defeat the conventional tactics of the Mexican army, even against overwhelming odds.
The psychological impact back in the main Texian camp must have been immense. This wasn't just holding off an attack, this was decimating the attackers.
It sent shockwaves through the army. It was concrete validation. For guys like the New Orleans Grays, it proved their long journey and commitment were worthwhile. For Austin, it showed the potential of these frontier fighters, even if they were hard to manage.
It must have cemented that belief we talked about, that Texian riflemen were just inherently better fighters.
It certainly fueled that belief, yeah. That combination of skill, their specific weapons, and their resourcefulness made them feel, perhaps rightly in some situations, superior soldier for soldier. They weren't just defending anymore. They started to see themselves as capable of taking the fight to the enemy.
But as you said, one brilliant victory, even one this decisive, doesn't win a siege by itself. Kos was still holed up in Bexar.
Absolutely. The elation from Concepción was real, but it couldn't magically solve Austin's bigger problems. The siege had to continue.
And as the initial excitement wore off, new challenges emerged. Less dramatic, maybe, but just as dangerous.
More insidious enemies, you could say. The reality of campaigning in Texas started to bite hard.
The weather.
Yep. Winter started closing in. It got cold, damp. Many of these volunteers weren't equipped for sitting outside in trenches or makeshift camps through a Texas winter. They lacked proper clothing, blankets.
And supplies. Always the issue.
Became critical. Food started running low. We see it in the letters and reports from the time. People like William Bear Travis desperately appealing for supplies, specifically mentioning the need for beeves cattle just to keep the men from starving or deserting.
So the thrill of battle was replaced by cold, hunger, and boredom.
The classic siege condition. Cold, hungry, waiting, nothing happening day after day. Morale, which had soared after Concepción, started to dip again. They were stuck.
That combination, boredom, desperation for supplies, maybe just needing something to happen, sounds like a recipe for something strange.
It absolutely was. That simmering frustration and the very real need for basic necessities, especially fodder for their animals, set the stage for the next notable event of the siege. A really peculiar skirmish, honestly.
Not a fight over walls or strategy, but something else.
Something much more mundane, yet vital for an army relying on horses and mules. It became known as the grass fight.
Okay, so let's wrap Concepción. The Battle of Concepción was a miracle on the battlefield. It proved to every Texian volunteer that they could not only fight the Mexican army, but that they could win, even when outnumbered.
A massive confidence builder, no doubt, showed the power of tactics and terrain.
But a single victory couldn't break the siege. As the days turned into weeks, a new enemy emerged for the Texian army. The bitter cold, dwindling supplies, and the crushing boredom of waiting.
Which would soon lead to one of the strangest skirmishes of the war, the grass fight.
It really highlights that lesson from Concepción, doesn't it? Tactical brilliance like Bowie's, adapting to the terrain, it's crucial. But you can't ignore the beans and bullets, or in this case, the grass.
Well put. Logistics are rarely glorious, but they're almost always decisive in the long run. Bowie's genius won the day at Concepción, but the lack of grass nearly crippled them later.
We will definitely dig into that weird and vital grass fight next time. For now, thank you for walking us through the miracle at Concepción.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic example of how quick thinking and using the environment can overcome seemingly impossible odds. Thanks for listening, everyone.